Let's talk about your experience of India, which is never anything minor for anybody.
No. No, it was, I mean, it depends on what you want to talk about. The first time I went to India, I went to work on a yoga video, and the woman who was the yoga instructor told me that we were going to be staying on the ashram of a saint. And I remember thinking, oh, I know there are saints, but I don't think she knows one. And that night I had a dream that I was in India, and I was in this room, and there was this man walking around the edge of the room, and he kept changing bodies. He kept completely changing into different people, and nobody else in the room noticed it. And he just looked at me, and he gave me this hand signal, and I woke up from that dream. I was meditating that morning, and I started asking for somebody to meditate with when I went to India. I wanted somebody to do the eyeball thing with, which is where you sit and you look in somebody's left eyeball and do this open-eyed meditation. So I just was asking for that for the 3 days before I went. So then we went to India, and my eyes were popping out of my head. It is really like nothing you've ever seen, and just looking at everything. And on the road from Delhi to Rishikesh, we stopped off in this little temple, and we walked in the door, and the man from my dream was sitting there. He was sitting against the wall, and the whole room was filled with love or something. And it hit me so strong. It was like somebody was holding a fire hose of energy on me. The blast was so strong that I almost fell down. My knees were weak, and they've only been weak a couple times in my life. And he looked at me, and he held up his finger, and he says, "I know you." And I did know him, but I couldn't speak to him. I was so choked up. I was crying immediately, and I was just infused with the most love I've ever felt in my life. And I also saw into something else for about a quarter of a second, really briefly, into another lifetime with him, where he was also my teacher. And so I was just shaking with joy, and it was just profound. And so we were filming this yoga video the next few days, and every time he would come by, he's like Jesus. He walks around, and he has light coming off of his fingers, and every gesture is so gentle. And he's followed by all these children, because he takes in children from all over India, and so they're there on the ashram. And so he basically just is just the most beautiful human being. But he would walk by, and I would cry again. And I was losing all my contact lenses. I had brought some extras, but by the time I left, I only had one contact lens. But anyway, so he'd walk by, and I'd cry, and he would do that little gesture that he did in the dream. And at one point, this woman came by, and she saw me crying, and she said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "I'm fine." I said, "Just every time he walks by, you know, I'm just so overwhelmed with joy." And she said, "Well, come with me for a minute." And I didn't know where she was taking me. She took me down a part of the ashram I hadn't seen before, and my whole body started shaking as we walked down this lane. And I didn't know what was happening. I didn't feel bad, but my whole body was shaking. And we turned a corner, and we went in a room, and it was just him sitting in the room. And she said, "Go." And I just could barely approach him. I was shaking, I was trembling, I couldn't look at him, I was crying. I couldn't believe she left me alone in the room with him. He was so magnificent, sitting in that room. It was unbelievable. And, you know, he says, come, and I sat down, and I started asking him questions right away, and he pretty much answered everything. And he says, you know, you can stop crying, you can stop crying. And I really tried to stop crying, and I thought, okay, I'm going to look up, I'm going to do the eyeball thing with him. And so I looked up, and it was so powerful. I mean, it was so much more than looking into the sun. I was so humbled to think that I could have even done the eyeball thing with him. My vibration wasn't high enough I mean, I was getting the most love that I could possibly receive as a human being, just sitting there. And, you know, so now I have a guru. I never thought that would happen. But I do, and it's pretty amazing. So.
And his name is?
His short name is Muniji. Muni means silent one, and he spent 12 years alone in the jungle as a child. But his long name is Puja Swami Chidanand Saraswati Maharaj. So he's Muniji of Rishikesh. Everybody knows him. So.
Wow, that's an amazing story.
Well, that's only the beginning of the adventures. I mean, it just continues. It's pretty amazing knowing somebody like that.